Carol Maltesi was a young woman full of life. A model, an artist, and a dreamer, she was on the brink of change, ready to leave her past behind. Her friends knew her as vibrant and ambitious, always striving for something greater. But behind the walls of her Milan apartment, something unspeakable happened. For months, a dark secret was hidden, locked away from the world. A discovery so horrifying, it left investigators reeling and a community shattered. What happened to Carol Maltesi? How could such a vibrant life come to such a violent and chilling end? And why did it take months for the truth to come to light? A story of trust, betrayal, and unimaginable horror. This is a case that raises one haunting question. How well do we truly know the people closest to us? Could this tragedy have been prevented? Or was it inevitable? Welcome to CrimeByte, your destination for uncovering the darkest truths and the most chilling crimes. Each week, we peel back the layers of real-life mysteries, diving into cases that leave us questioning the very fabric of trust, morality, and justice. Today, we unravel the tragic story of Carol Maltesi, a vibrant young woman whose life was brutally cut short in a crime that shocked an entire nation. A woman full of dreams, her vibrant light was extinguished by the very person she thought she could trust. Her story is one of betrayal, obsession, and manipulation, a reminder of the darkness that can hide behind a charming facade. How does a trusted friend turn into a cold-blooded killer? What drove this man to commit such an unspeakable act? And how was such a horrifying secret kept hidden for months? In this episode, we look into the twisted psyche of a killer, the heartbreaking loss of a promising life, and the search for answers in a case that stunned a nation. Prepare for a journey into the depths of betrayal and horror as we bring you the chilling story of Carol Maltesi. This is a tale that will leave you questioning the very nature of trust and the unsettling reality of the darkness that often lurks closest to home. Carol Maltesi was more than a face on a screen. She was a dreamer, a woman determined to build a better future. Her career in the adult entertainment industry had brought her financial independence, but her heart longed for something more. She wasn't content to remain where she was. Carol was ready to turn the page to a brighter, more fulfilling chapter. She had recently decided to leave Milan, saying goodbye to a world she had outgrown. Moving away meant a chance to redefine herself, to leave behind the whispers of judgment and the shadows of her past. She confided in close friends, sharing her excitement about the fresh start awaiting her. But even as Carol made plans to leave, not everyone in her life was ready to let her go. Among her circle was someone who saw her choice as a threat, a man who would rather destroy her than watch her walk away. Carol was no stranger to challenges. Her career had required resilience, and she had faced her share of setbacks. But nothing could have prepared her for what lay ahead. A betrayal so profound, it would rob her of the future she had worked so hard to achieve. She was ready for a new beginning, but someone close to her saw it as an ending. What was it about Carol's plans to move on that made her a target? Who decided that her future was a threat, and why? Davide Fontana appeared to be the embodiment of an ordinary man. A banker by trade, his days revolved around numbers, clients, and polished professionalism. To the outside world, he was a quiet, reserved figure who lived a structured, predictable life. Yet, behind the facade of orderliness, Davide's private life revealed a starkly different man. Lonely and socially awkward, he craved connection, but struggled to form meaningful relationships. That changed when he met Carol Maltesi, his charismatic neighbor. Carol's warm, outgoing nature drew Davide in immediately. Unlike the walls of professionalism he navigated at work, Carol's vibrant personality offered him a glimpse of a life far removed from his own. Over time, their casual exchanges in the hallway grew into friendly chats over coffee and the occasional shared meal. For Carol, their friendship was simple and convenient, two neighbors sharing company. But for Davide, it became something more. He was captivated by her charm, fascinated by her confidence, and increasingly possessive of her attention. As their friendship grew, so did Davide's obsession. He found himself resenting the other people in her life, friends, colleagues, and potential romantic interests. He wanted her world to revolve around him, and the idea of Carol leaving Milan unsettled him deeply. Carol's decision to move to Verona was the catalyst that shifted their dynamic. For Davide, the thought of losing her was unbearable. He masked his growing anxiety with feigned support, but inside, his possessiveness was festering. Was this a friendship turned toxic, or was something darker brewing beneath the surface? As Carol prepared to leave, David's fixation deepened, setting the stage for a betrayal no one could have foreseen. The day began like any other. Carol Maltesi was preparing to leave for a brief trip as part of her plan to start fresh in Verona. Despite the excitement of her upcoming move, she agreed to spend some time with Davide Fontana. A favor to a friend she thought she knew. For Davide, this wasn't just another day. It was his chance to cling to Carol's presence, to savor what he believed would be one of their last moments together before she left him behind. But beneath the surface, his thoughts churned with dark and conflicting emotions. According to David's later confession, the day began innocently enough. They chatted, shared a few laughs, and even discussed her plans for Verona. But there was a tension in the air, a palpable unease that Carol, in her kindness, likely overlooked. At some point, their conversation took a turn. Davide suggested they play a game, a seemingly harmless idea meant to pass the time. Carol, trusting him as a friend, agreed. What happened next remains a chilling testament to how trust can be shattered in an instant. Davide would later describe the game as playful. But as the moments passed, his demeanor darkened. In his confession, he admitted that his emotions spiraled out of control. Jealousy, anger, and desperation intertwining in a lethal cocktail. What should have been a moment of trust and camaraderie turned into a nightmare. In his confession, Davide described the horrifying escalation, how he struck her during the game, how she moved in pain, and how he continued his attack. Carol's life ended in those harrowing moments, taken by someone she thought she could trust. But why did David's obsession culminate in such violence? And what drove him to commit an act so brutal, so final? The events following Carol Maltesi's death exposed a darkness that few could have fathomed. What Davide Fontana did next was not an act of panic. It was cold, calculated, and methodical. With Carol's lifeless body in his apartment, Fontana faced a choice. He could have called for help, confessed his crime, and faced the consequences. But instead, he made a chilling decision that would forever define him. He chose to hide the evidence. He spent hours cleaning the crime scene, erasing every trace of the violence that had occurred. According to his later confession, this wasn't a frantic attempt to cover his tracks. It was a deliberate process, a calculated effort to control the situation. But erasing the immediate evidence wasn't enough. Fontana knew that Carol's body would eventually be discovered unless he took more extreme measures. What followed was an act so barbaric that it shocked even the most seasoned investigators. Fontana dismembered Carol's body, a gruesome act carried out with chilling detachment. His confession revealed the stark reality of his actions. He treated her remains as though they were objects to be disposed of, not the remains of a woman he had once called a friend. Over the following days, Fontana stored Carol's remains in a freezer, a cold, dark place that mirrored his state of mind. To the outside world, life in the Milan suburb continued as normal. Neighbors passed by his apartment, unaware of the horrors hidden within. But Fontana's actions didn't stop there. He went to extraordinary lengths to maintain the illusion that Carol was still alive. He used her phone to send messages to friends and family, crafting replies that mimicked her tone and style. For months, he kept up this charade, fooling everyone who knew her. This deception extended to social media, where he continued to post updates on Carol's accounts. To her followers, she seemed alive and well, living the vibrant life she had always shared online. But behind the screen, Fontana was spiraling further into darkness. Fontana's actions weren't just an attempt to cover up his crime. They were a disturbing assertion of control over Carol's life, even in death. By manipulating her digital presence, he ensured that her story remained under his control, at least for a while. But as the days turned to weeks and the weeks into months, cracks began to show. Fontana's carefully constructed facade couldn't last forever. And when the truth finally came to light, it would expose the depths of his depravity. Davide Fontana's crime wasn't just a moment of violence. It was followed by a months-long charade, an elaborate cover-up designed to maintain the illusion that Carol Maltesi was alive and well. For months, Fontana carefully constructed a facade of normalcy, manipulating Carol's digital presence and financial records to keep suspicion at bay. His first step was to ensure that Carol's disappearance wouldn't raise alarms. Using her phone, he sent messages to her friends and family, adopting her tone and style to maintain the illusion. The messages were friendly, light-hearted, typical of Carol's usual demeanor, but Fontana's cover-up didn't stop at text messages. He knew that if Carol's absence became too noticeable, questions would arise. To prevent this, he took control of her financial affairs, paying her rent and other bills to ensure that no one would suspect anything was amiss. For months, Fontana maintained this double life, seamlessly blending his role as a seemingly ordinary banker with his efforts to erase any trace of his crime. He even posted updates on Carol's social media accounts, using her vibrant online presence to convince the world that she was alive and thriving. Fontana's actions weren't just about hiding his crime. They were an assertion of control. By managing Carol's digital life, he ensured that her story remained under his control, even as the truth lay frozen in his apartment. Despite his meticulous efforts, Fontana's cover-up wasn't without cracks. As the months passed, Carol's absence became increasingly difficult to explain. Friends and family began to question why she hadn't returned calls or made plans to visit, but Fontana had an answer for everything. He claimed that Carol was busy with work, traveling frequently, and unable to meet up. For a time, these explanations were enough to satisfy those who asked. Still, the weight of his lies began to take its toll. Fontana found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, anticipating the moment when his carefully constructed facade would crumble. And yet, for months, Fontana managed to keep the truth hidden. His ability to manipulate technology, finances, and relationships allowed him to maintain his deception far longer than anyone could have imagined. But as the saying goes, the truth always finds a way to emerge. The mystery of Carol Maltesi's disappearance began to unravel in March 2022, when an innocent walk through the mountains turned into a horrifying discovery. Local hikers stumbled upon a series of black garbage bags abandoned on the roadside. What lay inside would shock an entire nation. Inside the bags were the dismembered remains of a young woman, carefully wrapped to conceal her identity. Forensic experts quickly determined that these remains had been transported from elsewhere, a chilling indication that the killer had taken extreme measures to cover their tracks. Back in Milan, word of the discovery began spreading rapidly, and authorities were under intense pressure to identify the victim. With no immediate leads, they turned to the media for assistance, releasing details about the remains and appealing for information from the public. As the investigation unfolded, a breakthrough came in the form of dental records. Within days, the remains were identified as belonging to Carol Maltesi, a young woman whose vibrant personality and career in adult entertainment had made her a rising star. The revelation sent shockwaves through her community and reignited questions about her sudden disappearance months earlier. With her identity confirmed, the focus shifted to uncovering the truth behind her gruesome death. Detectives began retracing Carol's final days, piecing together her movements and examining the people closest to her. All roads led back to one man, Davide Fontana. Fontana initially seemed cooperative, expressing shock and sorrow at the news of Carol's death. However, his statements were riddled with inconsistencies. When questioned about Carol's sudden disappearance, he claimed that she had left for a new job abroad and had cut ties with everyone she knew. But investigators weren't convinced. The timeline he provided didn't align with evidence they had uncovered. Phone records revealed that Carol's device had remained active in Milan long after she was supposedly abroad. Even more damning was the discovery of payments made from her bank account, transactions that Fontana could not adequately explain. As suspicions grew, a deeper search into Fontana's life revealed chilling details. Surveillance footage from the days following Carol's disappearance showed him purchasing cleaning supplies and renting a vehicle large enough to transport heavy items. Combined with forensic evidence linking him to the garbage bags found in Borno, the case against him was rapidly building. Fontana's calm demeanor began to crack under pressure. Faced with mounting evidence, his explanations grew more erratic. Investigators noticed his hands trembling during questioning, his voice faltering as he repeated rehearsed statements. The final blow came when investigators searched Fontana's apartment. Hidden in plain sight was the freezer, where Carol's remains had been kept for months. It was a macabre discovery that confirmed their worst fears and solidified Fontana's role in the crime. Fontana was arrested on suspicion of murder, and the once respected banker found himself at the center of one of Italy's most shocking cases. Despite his initial denials, the overwhelming weight of the evidence left him with few options. For the investigators who had worked tirelessly on the case, there was relief in knowing that they had stopped a man capable of such horrifying acts. But for Carol's loved ones, the arrest marked only the beginning of their journey for justice. After months of investigation, the net finally closed around Davide Fontana. With evidence mounting against him, ranging from surveillance footage to the chilling discovery in his apartment, there was little room for him to maintain his facade of innocence. Under the weight of questioning, Fontana began to speak, and what he revealed would haunt everyone who heard it. When asked about the events leading to Carol's death, Fontana's voice was calm, almost detached, as he recounted the horrifying details. According to him, the two had agreed to film content together on the day of the murder, something they had done in the past as part of Carol's career. But this time, the dynamic shifted. Fontana described how a consensual game took a deadly turn when he began striking Carol during an act that was supposed to simulate rough play. Fontana claimed he lost control in the heat of the moment. He admitted that when Carol began moving and showing signs of distress, he continued hitting her, his justification chillingly devoid of remorse. "She moved and I kept hitting her," he told detectives, his tone unnervingly matter-of-fact. It was a statement that sent shivers through the room, leaving even seasoned investigators shaken. Fontana's chilling lack of emotion didn't end there. When asked why he didn't call for help or attempt to save Carol, his response was cold and calculated. He admitted that his immediate concern wasn't for her well-being, but for his own freedom. "I panicked," he said, "but not because of what I'd done, because I didn't want to get caught." Over the course of his confession, Fontana detailed how he dismembered Carol's body, describing the process with a level of detachment that horrified even the most hardened investigators. He explained how he moved her remains to his freezer, storing them for weeks while he figured out how to dispose of them. "I thought I could just make it all go away," he said, his voice eerily devoid of regret. Fontana went on to describe how he used Carol's phone to maintain the illusion that she was still alive. He sent messages to her contacts, updated her social media, and even paid her rent, all in an effort to keep up appearances. To the outside world, Carol was simply taking a break, pursuing new opportunities. But behind the scenes, Fontana's double life was beginning to crack under pressure. When detectives pressed him on why he finally decided to dispose of Carol's remains, Fontana's response was chillingly pragmatic. He claimed he couldn't handle the constant reminder of what he had done and wanted to eliminate any evidence that could tie him to the crime. His decision to dump her remains in Borno, he admitted, was a desperate attempt to make her disappear without a trace. Fontana's confession was as shocking as it was revealing. Forensic psychologists later noted his alarming detachment, describing his actions as those of a man who viewed Carol not as a human being, but as an obstacle to be removed. His lack of remorse and calculated behavior painted a chilling portrait of a man capable of unimaginable cruelty. As Fontana's confession drew to a close, one question lingered in the minds of investigators. Was this truly a crime of passion, as he claimed, or was it something far darker? His methodical actions, his cold reasoning, and his lack of guilt suggested a level of premeditation that was hard to ignore. The trial of Davide Fontana captivated not only Milan but the entire nation. For months, the gruesome details of Carol Maltesi's murder had dominated headlines. Now all eyes were on the courtroom as Fontana faced justice. Inside, the air was thick with tension, as the prosecution and defense prepared to reveal the chilling truths of this harrowing case. The prosecution wasted no time in painting a picture of calculated brutality. They detailed how Fontana had manipulated Carol, hid his crime, and coldly disposed of her body. The evidence was damning: forensic reports, digital footprints, and most notably, Fontana's own confession. Prosecutors described his actions as those of a man devoid of empathy, driven by obsession and control. But the defense had a different narrative. Fontana's lawyers argued that his actions, while horrific, were not premeditated. They claimed he had panicked after an accidental death during a consensual game. They emphasized his immediate regret and lack of criminal history, framing him as a man overwhelmed by fear and poor judgment. Carol's family sat in the gallery, their pain visible as they listened to the defense's attempt to humanize the man who had taken their daughter from them. Her mother, eyes red from tears, clutched a photograph of Carol, a stark reminder of the vibrant life that was stolen. As the trial progressed, shocking revelations emerged. Fontana's meticulous planning after the murder raised doubts about his claims of panic. The prosecution presented evidence of his online searches for body disposal methods, his use of Carol's phone to mislead her friends and family, and his calm demeanor in the weeks following her death. These details painted a chilling picture of a man who went to great lengths to cover his tracks. The emotional climax of the trial came when Carol's loved ones took the stand. Her mother's testimony was particularly heart-wrenching, as she recounted the day she realized her daughter was missing and the horror of learning what had happened. Her voice broke as she described Carol's dreams of a better future, dreams that would never come true. Fontana's demeanor throughout the trial remained stoic, his lack of visible remorse fueling public outrage. When asked if he had anything to say to Carol's family, his response was brief and unsettling. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, "but I can't change what happened." The trial concluded with Fontana's sentencing. The judge, visibly affected by the brutality of the case, delivered a harsh sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of relief and grief. While many felt justice had been served, others questioned whether any punishment could truly account for the horror of Carol's death. Outside the courthouse, the public reaction was intense. Activists and supporters gathered, holding signs that read, "Justice for Carol," and calling for greater protections against gender-based violence. News outlets broadcast live updates, the case sparking nationwide conversations about trust, obsession, and the vulnerabilities that can exist in even the closest relationships. As the trial came to an end, one question lingered in the minds of everyone following the case. Was Fontana's sentence enough to prevent such tragedies in the future? Or was there more work to be done to protect vulnerable individuals from those who prey on their trust? Carol's murder sent ripples of shock and grief through her community. In the quiet streets of Milan, neighbors who once exchanged casual greetings now questioned how such a horrifying crime could unfold so close to home. The tragedy was not just personal, it was a collective wound that revealed vulnerabilities hidden beneath the surface. For those who knew her, Carol was more than a public figure in the adult entertainment industry. She was a friend, a daughter, and a neighbor. Many described her as kind, ambitious, and someone who brought light to every room she entered. Her vibrant personality made the reality of her loss even harder to bear. The adult entertainment industry, often misunderstood and stigmatized, also felt the weight of Carol's murder. Advocacy groups spoke out, using her story to highlight the unique dangers faced by performers in the industry. While Carol's work was a personal choice, it also exposed her to risks that many in her line of work encounter daily: misplaced judgments, exploitation, and in extreme cases, violence. Industry leaders called for increased safety measures and resources for performers. They emphasized the need for secure environments, better mental health support, and legal protections to address the challenges unique to their work. Carol's story became a rallying cry for change, uniting performers, advocates, and allies in a shared mission to ensure no one else would suffer a similar fate. As Carol's murder dominated headlines, it also sparked difficult conversations about trust and the dangers of unchecked relationships. The fact that her killer was someone she trusted, a friend, a confidant, was a chilling reminder that the most devastating betrayals often come from within. Communities across the country began to reflect on the importance of recognizing warning signs and supporting those who might be vulnerable. Local residents, many of whom had never met Carol, expressed their grief and solidarity with her family. Vigils, memorials, and online tributes poured in, each one carrying a shared message. Her life mattered, and her story would not be forgotten. In the face of such tragedy, the community sought ways to turn their collective grief into meaningful action. Beyond Milan, the international spotlight on Carol's murder ignited debates about how society views individuals in marginalized or stigmatized professions. Social media became a platform for both support and criticism, highlighting the complexities of public perception. While many rallied to honor Carol's humanity, others revealed the persistent biases and judgments that often accompany discussions about her line of work. For advocacy groups, this case was a painful but necessary reminder of the need for education and awareness. They worked tirelessly to shift the narrative, ensuring that Carol was remembered not just for her profession, but for the person she was, a woman with dreams, passions, and loved ones who would forever miss her. As the community began to heal, one question lingered. How do we protect those who are most vulnerable when trust becomes a weapon? Carol's story is a testament to the importance of vigilance, compassion, and action. Her death was a tragedy, but her legacy could inspire a movement for change. Carol Maltesi's murder left an indelible scar on her community and the world. Her life was tragically cut short by a toxic obsession that went unnoticed until it was too late. As we reflect on her story, we are compelled to ask, how can we prevent such tragedies in the future? This case is more than just a story of violence. It's a harsh reminder of the dangers of unchecked obsession and the critical importance of addressing red flags before they escalate. Fontana's actions did not arise in isolation. His possessiveness, manipulation, and inability to accept Carol's independence were warning signs of a deeper issue, one that ultimately exploded into violence. It's not easy to identify when someone crosses the line between affection and obsession. For many, love and trust can obscure the early indicators of danger. But Fontana's case demonstrates the devastating cost of ignoring those signs. His escalating need for control and inability to respect Carol's autonomy were clear signals of a toxic dynamic, signals that, in hindsight, were harbingers of disaster. Experts agree. Education and awareness are the first steps in preventing similar tragedies. Recognizing patterns of manipulation, possessiveness, and gaslighting can empower individuals to take action before it's too late. Whether it's a friend noticing a loved one's withdrawal or someone realizing they're in a dangerous relationship, early intervention can save lives. Beyond individual relationships, this case raises larger societal questions. How do we foster a culture that prioritizes respect, communication, and equality? How do we create environments where people feel safe to speak out and seek help? These questions don't have easy answers, but they are necessary conversations inspired by Carol's tragic story. Carol's death also underscores the importance of systemic change. From mental health resources to law enforcement training, there's a pressing need to improve how we handle cases of toxic relationships and stalking. Advocacy groups have called for stronger protections for individuals in vulnerable positions, urging policymakers to take bold steps to address these challenges. While we reflect on Carol's life and the senseless violence that ended it, it's essential to focus on her legacy. Her story has sparked discussions worldwide about the importance of standing against toxic behavior, supporting survivors, and building a society where no one feels isolated in their struggles. As the world processes this tragedy, one lesson stands out: the importance of vigilance. Recognizing the signs of obsession, understanding the power of community intervention, and ensuring that individuals have access to resources are critical in preventing similar cases. This isn't just about Carol. It's about every individual who has ever felt trapped, silenced, or afraid. Her story, though heartbreaking, serves as a call to action, a rallying cry for awareness, empathy, and change. In the shadow of this tragedy, we must find the light. We must learn to recognize the warning signs, to offer support to those in need, and to take a stand against violence in all its forms. Carol's life was filled with dreams and possibilities. It's our responsibility to ensure her story prevents another life from being lost. As the story of Carol Maltesi draws to a close, we are left with more than just a haunting crime. Her life, her dreams, and her tragic end are a stark reminder of the dangers that can arise from trust misplaced and warning signs ignored. But the lessons her story teaches us are not confined to her alone. They extend to all of us. Every year, countless individuals face threats from toxic relationships, obsessive behavior, and unchecked violence. Carol's story may be extraordinary in its tragedy, but it is not unique. For every publicized case, many more suffer in silence, their cries unheard and their stories untold. This is where we come in. Together, we have the power to change the narrative. By learning to recognize the early signs of unhealthy behavior, by reaching out to those who may be struggling, and by fostering environments of safety and support, we can prevent another life from being cut short. Her family has turned their pain into purpose, advocating for greater awareness and stronger systems of protection. But their fight doesn't end with them. It's a fight we must all join. This is not just about honoring Carol. It's about ensuring her legacy becomes a beacon of hope and change. At CrimeByte, we believe in uncovering the truths that matter, truths that challenge us to act. This case compels us to ask difficult but necessary questions. How do we support those trapped in harmful situations? How do we foster a society that values open communication and mental health awareness? And most importantly, how do we ensure no one else experiences what Carol endured? We can start by staying informed, by speaking up when something feels wrong, by refusing to look away when someone is in need. These small acts of vigilance and courage can ripple out, creating safer communities for all. If you or someone you know is struggling, don't hesitate to seek help. Whether it's through local organizations, national hotlines, or trusted friends and family, reaching out can save lives. You are not alone, and help is always available. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the most chilling and heartbreaking cases we've covered. If this story moved you, if it inspired you to think or act, we urge you to share it. Subscribe to CrimeByte for more stories that shed light on the darkness and help build a world where justice prevails. How will you turn this story into action and ensure that Carol's legacy is one of hope, change, and a safer world for all? Share your opinions in the comment section.